There was a time when humans had no psychology, no neuroscience, no therapy. Yet somehow, they understood the mind with frightening precision. Before brain scans, diagnostic manuals, or scientific language, they used stories, not to entertain themselves, but to understand what moves us from within. Myths were not fantasies. They were patterns, stories designed to make sense of fear, desire, power, and the invisible forces shaping human behavior. They warned us about power, what happens when it goes unchecked, about ego, and how easily it blinds us, about fear, and the choices it forces us to make. And thousands of years later, nothing has really changed. The tools look different, the language evolved, but the same forces still shape how we think and how we fail. Today, we return to three ancient Greek myths, not as legends, not as history, but as mirrors, reflecting patterns still shaping the modern mind. Plato described Atlantis as a marvel, advanced, powerful, a civilization so confident in its progress that it believed collapse was impossible. But success changed them. Expansion replaced restraint. Dominance became obsession. And slowly, balance gave way to excess. Atlantis wasn't destroyed by enemies. It wasn't conquered. It collapsed from within, when power outpaced wisdom and growth forgot its limits. And when balance is lost, collapse doesn't arrive as chaos. It comes quietly, as systems fail and certainty gives way to silence. When people were afraid to decide, they traveled to Delphi, not seeking truth, but relief from uncertainty and permission to choose. Kings and generals stood before the oracle, not because she knew the future, but because certainty feels divine when the mind is afraid. The priestess entered a trance. Her voice slowed, her words fractured, and what sounded divine was something far more human. Centuries later, we learned the vapors altered perception. The voice of the gods was chemistry, filtered through belief and crowned as truth. But the power of the oracle was real. Because when the mind fears uncertainty, it will surrender judgment to anything that sounds confident. Narcissus was admired by everyone, desired, praised, but none of it mattered, because the only gaze that held him was his own. When he saw his reflection, he didn't recognize himself. He fell in love with an image, one he could never touch, never become. He couldn't step away. The image held him still, and the longer he stared, the more the world faded, until nothing else remained. Three myths, one warning, different stories, the same mistake. The human mind doesn't collapse from ignorance, but from imbalance. Too much ambition, too little grounding, too much certainty, too little responsibility, too much image, and not enough self. The Greeks didn't give us myths to admire. They gave us warnings to remember, maps of the mind meant to be lived, not worshipped. You don't need to escape the world. You don't need to conquer it. You need to return to balance, to judgment, to yourself. Not less ambition, but wiser ambition. Not silence, but discernment. Not control, but awareness. This is what ancient wisdom always pointed toward: balance over dominance, awareness over control, depth over appearance. If you've ever felt like you were chasing a life that wasn't yours, you're not alone. Ancient wisdom helped me rediscover what matters, and maybe it can do the same for you. Subscribe to Timeless Mind by Nikolaus. Join the journey.